definitions was that he said, Innal haqq thaqilun. Innal haqq thaqilun. Wa huwa ma'a thiqalihi mari'un. Indeed, truth is very heavy. Truth is very heavy. But despite it being very heavy, it is easy to accept. Right? Truth is very heavy. But its acceptance has been made easy. It's not hard for you to accept it. وَإِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ خَفِيفٌ وَهُوَ مَعَ خِفَّتِهِ وَبِيءٌ. And indeed, batil, indeed falsehood, it is very, very light. But alongside it being very light, it is very destructive. It is disease-like. It is, it is like disease. It is destructive. وَتَرْكُ الْخَطِيئَةِ أَيْسَرُ أو قال خير من طلب التوبة. To abandon sin is much easier than to make tawbah. In trying to make tawbah. وَرُبَّ شَهْوَةِ سَاعَةٍ أَوْرَثَتْ حَزَنًا طَوِيلًا. And maybe a small time that you spend in following your lusts and desires, it will make you inherit a long time of grief and sadness. So this maw'idah has a number of lessons and benefits for us. Number one, he described haqq and batil. He described to us the qualities of truth and falsehood, the attributes of truth and falsehood. Truth is something that is very heavy but easy to accept, meaning it's very heavy to carry. And we can see this in the Quran, because Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila. He said to the Messenger, indeed, we are going to reveal to you a very heavy statement. And likewise, the ayah at the end of Surah Al-Ahzab, where he described the amana, the trust that was given and presented to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they refused, they did not want to carry it because of the weightiness of this amana. And then فَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, then man, he carried it, إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Indeed, he was one who is ignorant and oppressive. So this shows that the truth is very weighty and heavy indeed. It is not a light affair. But at the same time, it is very easy, it is mari'un, very easy to accept. And the falsehood is the other way around. It's the other way around. Falsehood is very light, very khafif. It's like the hawa and the shahawat, the desires and the lusts. They're very easy to come by. They're light and they flow very easily and quickly. It's very easy, very light, because it agrees with the desires and so on and so forth. But it is extremely destructive, extremely dangerous. And so this shows, this is the first meaning or the first benefit from the statement of Hudhayfa. And the second benefit that he alludes to is that to abandon a sin is much easier to try and make tawbah afterwards. And to engage in pleasure of an hour, maybe it will lead you to have a long period of grief and anxiety thereafter. So what he's alluding to here and teaching us is that it's easy for you just to withhold from a sin than to try and make tawbah. Because tawbah, you will say, yes, soon I will make tawbah. And maybe a servant will not be alive to make the tawbah the next morning or the next evening. And maybe he will keep forgetting and he will not make tawbah eventually. So to abandon the sin is a much better situation than to make tawbah for it afterwards. And likewise, you might spend a small time committing a sin, engaging in lusts and pleasures, and that will inherit you a long, long time of grief that will disease your heart and sadness that will, afflict your heart. So it is better to avoid that and not to fall into that. So this is another, in essence, the benefit in this piece of advice is that a person should show patience in abandoning sin and disobedience. It is better than all of the anxieties and the stresses and the diseases of the heart which follow on from that sin. And we'll finish with just one more, inshallah ta'ala. And this is the statement of Hudhayfa in relation to how the deen is stripped from a person. He was asked, أتركت بنو إسرائيل دينها في يوم واحد? He was asked, did the Bani Israel abandon their religion in a single day? قال لا. He said no. ولكنهم كانوا إذا أمروا بشيء تركوه وإذا نهوا عن شيء ركبوه حتى انسلخوا من دينهم كما ينسلخ الرجل من قميصه. So he said no. The Bani Israel did not lose their religion in a single day. But whenever they were commanded with something, they abandoned it. And whenever they were prohibited from something, they fell into it. Until the deen, they were stripped of their deen, just like a man takes off his shirt. Just like a man, his shirt is removed from him. So this, what is being indicated here, in fact, before we come to that, there's a statement of Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, in his Nuniyya, and he says, Wallahi, ma khawfi dhunuba fa innaha la ala tariq al-afwi wal-ghufran. He says, by Allah, my real and true fear is not from sins as such, because sins, they are subject to forgiveness and pardon. Sins, you know that they will be forgiven and pardoned. So my fear is not really from dhunub, because we know that they are met with pardon and forgiveness. لكنما أخشى انسلاخ القلب من تحكيم هذا الوحي والقرآن. But I fear that the heart is stripped of judging back to this wahi, to this Quran. ورضا بآراء الرجال وخرسها لا كان ذاك بمنة الرحمن. And being satisfied with the opinions of men. So basically the general meaning here that he's saying is that I'm not so much worried about sins, because sins are something you can treat with tawbah and istighfar, and Allah will grant you pardon and forgiveness. But what I fear the most is that my heart, it will no longer judge by the Quran and the Sunnah, and will turn to the opinions of men. And when it turns to the opinions of men, meaning the innovations and the faulty statements and so forth, then the deen will be stripped from the heart of a person. So this now, the meaning that is indicated here is that there are two levels really. The first, which is the greater of the two, is bid'ah. Because bid'ah, inhiraf, it is something that strips you of your deen. When you enter into the bid'ah of the Khawarij, or the Rafida, or the Jahmiyyah, or the Mu'tazila, or the Ikhwan, or the Tabligh, or the Tahrir, and all these different jama'at who oppose the usul of the Salaf, and they do not judge by the Book of Allah and the Sunnah in what they are upon, in their creed, in their da'wah, in the manhaj, then your heart will be stripped. The deen will be taken away because of this. This is one level. And the second level is, of course, by way of sin, committing sins. And that's what Bani Israel did. And that's what Ibn al-Qayyim, although he fears this, like he said, obviously we fear the sins, because by abandoning that which is commanded and falling into that which is prohibited, over time, a person loses his Emaan over time. His heart becomes stripped of Emaan over time. So in other words, you lose your deen, not overnight. Nobody loses their deen like in a morning or an evening. But a person loses their deen over time. He spends years and years and years committing sins, not making tawbah. And eventually, the heart becomes hard and becomes rusted. Then when he's realized, he now wants to turn back and make tawbah, but he can't, because the heart has now reached such a state of hardness and rust that making tawbah and making dhikr is not having the effect that it should have if his heart was still alive. So it's now much harder for him to return his heart back to what it used to be, because the Emaan has been slowly stripped over that long period of time by committing that which is unlawful and abandoning that which is wajib upon him. So this is one level. And the other level, of course, is bid'ah, dalala, inhiraf, which can actually lead to a person leaving his deen even more quickly, because this is the nature of bid'ah. It is, it is inhiraf. A person thinks it to be guidance, and it strips him of his deen and may even lead him to kufr and wal-iyadu billah. So this is the statement, the final statement we'll finish with. And so as you can see, these are great and mighty benefits from the Sahaba. You can see that they are drawing from the Quran, from the Sunnah, from the fiqh that they acquired from the Quran and the Sunnah. And these are words of wisdom, and this is a sign of their great fiqh of the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. So I advise myself and everybody else that we return back to the understanding of the Sahaba. This is what it means, that we go back to the understanding of the Sahaba. We see how they understood the Quran. We see how they made tafsir of the Quran. We see how they extracted the halal and the haram. We see how they, and likewise we go back to their admonitions, their mawa'idh, because they speak with wisdom and light and hikmah from what they've drawn from the Quran and from the Sunnah, practical advice. So we'll conclude with that, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah make it of benefit to us. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad.